to a nation that unarmed are trying to, through civil disobedience and non-violence way, achieve their freedom. The playing field has now been equalized. My message remained the same as it was 20 years ago. But unfortunately, the truth is that because the pursuit of appeasement and the fear of a regime that takes hostages and intimidates Western governments to have an open dialogue with the force of democracy, they have always shied away and been fearful of talking to someone like me. I think this is changing now. I think we have much more receptive ears. What I would like to be able to do, given the opportunity, is to explain the mechanics of that change so they understand how we intend to do it, what we propose as an instrument, where can they, in fact, facilitate that or assist us. But this is more a discussion for the process. Right now, as we speak, let me point to a few issues that are imperative, where the world can immediately help us. It has nothing to do with talking about policy of regime change and all that. It has to do with empowering a nation seeking liberty. The regime is at war with its own people. It is trying to take revenge on the people, executing political prisoners, shutting down the internet, even landlines in the last few days. They are waging war against our own people. This regime's biggest fear is not an Israeli attack or an American response. It's the people themselves that they fear the most. This is what these world leaders have to recognize, that these are people who want to be with you, the free world, and the only obstacle between them and the free world is this regime. So don't be intimidated by the regime menace. Trust in a nation that wants peaceful relations with a neighborhood. They are not at war with Israel. They're not at war with the Arabs. They're not at war with America. The regime is a regime that has been chanting death to Israel and death to America for 46 years. The Iranian people say, we want to be friends with the world. We want to have cordial relations. It's up to you, world leaders, to recognize that potential, to trust the Iranian people in their intentions, and this is what will be the difference. This time, stay on the right side of history. You have an opportunity today. The worst thing that can happen is for this regime to continue to exist. It is on its way down. We just have to facilitate and expedite the process. So more harm is not done, not just to the Iranian nation, but everything that, as long as this regime continues to survive, it can still hurt a lot. We have this opportunity. This should be the agenda, not only to eliminate this regime, but also to know that there is a plan for transition. It's not going to be chaos. It's not going to be unknown outcome. But for that, we need to be able to coordinate. So it is, I don't think it is anymore the question of whether or not or if there should be, but how can we make sure that this is a successful transition? And of course, there will be a need for very serious discussions as to how this or that country can, in a way or not, be effective in helping our cause and therefore guaranteeing our success, which is win-win at the end of the day.
Okay, last two questions. Channel 12 and then the Sun. I'm afraid that we've given a lot of time for questions. Thank you very much.
Hello, and thank you for being here today and for your courageous stance. I'm Elad from Israeli Channel 12. I wanted to ask you whether you're in contact with any Israeli officials or representatives, and how do you picture relations between the two countries in the day after the regime will be changed? And also, you've mentioned some of the previous attempts on to have a civil unrest to topple the regime that have been unsuccessful. What makes you optimistic that this time will be different? Thank you.
Well, first of all, my team has been, and myself in some cases, in contact with representatives of various governments. As you may know, 2 years ago, I traveled to Israel. I met at the top level of leadership over there. There's an obvious understanding of the vision and what could be the future of a different Iran, and how does that play to, what could be, unlike this regime, the future of our region. I mentioned the fact that we do have the Abraham Accords, which of course was sabotaged by the regime. I think we should elevate that to the Cyrus Accords, which includes Iran as a key player into that, and making sure that ultimately we finally have a neighborhood that is stable and at peace with one another. This is the vision, and I think this is a message that has resonated very well, at least regionally. But you're right. Is this time different? It is different in the sense that, as I pointed earlier, we have had many uprisings in Iran, at least in the last decade. The last one being, of course, the Women Life Freedom movement. And all those brave souls that have died in the process did not need to have a guarantee of success before they committed to it. They are still resilient. They will still continue fighting. But what's different this time? This time they see that the regime's instrument of repression and terror is being decimated, it's been neutralized, and they understand that this is not a war against them, it's against the regime itself. That in fact it is helping the Iranian people by neutralizing the regime's instrument that so far has been killing left and right our brave compatriots in all of these movements. And this time the Iranian people say, maybe we have a chance. Look, we have seen history many times and its ebbs and flows, right? But ultimately the Berlin Wall came down. The Soviet Union did collapse. The dissidents in those countries finally got their chance. I'm sure that Nelson Mandela or Lech Walesa could not do this at some point without some level of solidarity, not just as a labor movement in Poland, mind you, solidarity in the sense of the world coming to their assistance. And the Iranian people are not asking for anyone to do the job for them. All they are saying is that it will be far less costly for us to succeed if this time you are with us, as opposed to continue a policy of appeasement and throwing this regime another lifeline. Because what would the regime would do with this lifeline? It will retaliate, it will take revenge, it's already trying to do that. So for the sake of the Iranian people and for the sake of the world, we have this opportunity now. We will do whatever it takes as Iranians to fight that fight. But the world needs to consider that the consequence of that change will put an immediate end to all the threats that this regime has represented, whether it is the nuclear threat or terrorism or radical ideology spreading and how it's impacting Europe. We see it in many countries, and all of that can be reversed. Not only that, but beyond security and stability, economic opportunities. How can Iranians benefit from that? How can the world benefit from that? Because you are no longer dealing with a regime that is a mafia-like corrupt system that plunders our natural resources at the expense of the Iranian people to spend it on nuclear programs or supporting its proxies in the region. We will talk about a national government, first and foremost concerned with the prosperity of its own country by means of creating all the opportunities, but also to tell the world Iran is as I said in my speech, is a huge potential for investment and growth, and that's also in the interest of the world. But you're not dealing with a corrupt mafia anymore. You're dealing with a country that is on terms with all the rules and regulations and principles of standard practice of business and what have you. That changes everything. This is, I think, what the world needs to be focused now. How can we make sure that this is the ultimate outcome? So we have a job to do, and I hope that through this dialogue and working beyond what we had to do as Iranians among ourselves, how can we communicate and explain to the world, this is how you can help us now, and in the long term, what opportunities will be created to the world. That's pretty much, I think, the course of action that we will see in the next few months. And of course, there will be much more for us to explain to all of you. But this is where we are at this stage.
Okay, last question on Kate from the Sun.
Thank you. Yes, Kate Davis from the Sun. How much of a threat does the Iranian regime pose in its current wounded state? Could we see them perhaps deploy a dirty bomb or even a hastily constructed nuclear weapon?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the first part. Could you repeat your question, please?
So my question is, how much of a danger does the Iranian regime pose right now in its current wounded state? Could we see them perhaps deploy a dirty bomb or a hastily constructed nuclear weapon?
Well, as far as the existing infrastructure that the regime has had, clearly has been severely damaged or curtailed. But as I explained in my speech, just because you have struck the key areas of development or enrichment doesn't mean that the nuclear threat is gone. As I said, they can go and purchase it from the North Koreans, for example. The point is that the finger on the trigger is ultimately the menace. That as long as this regime continues to exist, we should not fall under the false premise that because we've hit or neutralized the nuclear enrichment plants or what have you, the threat is gone. For a while it may be. For a while it might have delayed it. But as long as this regime continues to exist, like a bad weed, it will keep popping up in your backyard. We need to make sure that it's completely eradicated. That's the ultimate guarantee, which is why now that we have this opportunity, now that the regime has been severely emasculated, if I could call it that, when the key instrument of repression and control and surveillance or whatever it is that a totalitarian regime utilizes against its own citizenry and as a menace to the world that is on the verge of collapse, recognize that this is a perfect window. Because I always said we should not jump to the conclusion that because diplomacy has failed, then we have to engage in conflict. I've always argued in all these years, many of you have heard me say that, why not the third way, which means the Iranian people are your alternative? You're not only limited to say, because we can't talk sense to them, we have to go and bomb the hell out of them. This is an opportunity to recognize that the regime is so weakened. Let's make the people of Iran the ultimate guarantee by investing on them, rather than hoping that through negotiations you can come to terms with a regime that it is in its DNA simply cannot comply with your expectation. We need to gravitate and have a shift of vision and strategy on that, and that's exactly what I begin to detect. I begin to detect more and more coming from governments that until now were just stuck on that status quo and that are thinking finally that things can change. We have to be able to anticipate a change in Iran, and what do we need to do for that? That's, I think, for me, a positive development. Thank you.
Thank you, Prince.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
If you have any media requests, go over here, and Joel at the back on the phone. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.